How did the US dollar become the most powerful currency in human history? Why is nearly every country, from Africa to Europe to Asia, dependent on a currency printed by just one nation? And why can't major powers like Russia, China, or even the European Union break free from its financial gravity? This isn't just about money. It's about how America turned its national currency into a tool of global influence, control, and even survival. To understand this, we need to journey back through wars, secret agreements, and collapsing empires. We'll uncover the key decisions that shaped our modern world and built the dollar's throne. But what happens if the world one day stops using the dollar? This is the incredible story of how the dollar conquered the planet, diving into a story of power, war, and money that completely reshaped our modern world. It's the story of how one currency came to dominate the globe, and how it all came crashing down. Picture the world before the 20th century. It wasn't the interconnected global village we know today. Instead, it was a patchwork of empires and powers. You had Britain, ruling the waves in a vast colonial empire. France held significant influence over continental Europe. A newly unified and ambitious Germany was on the rise. And let's not forget the sprawling, ancient empires. The Ottoman, the Russian, and the Austro-Hungarian. In this fragmented world, one thing tied almost everything together. The British pound sterling. For over 200 years, the pound was king. If you wanted to buy or sell goods internationally, from cotton in India to timber in Canada, you priced it in pounds. Foreign governments and central banks didn't just hold gold. They held huge amounts of British government bonds as their reserves. London wasn't just a city. It was the undisputed financial capital of the entire planet. The world's banking system ran through its streets. The pound was seen as safe, stable, and as good as gold. It was the ultimate financial bedrock. But then, the unthinkable happened. World War I. This catastrophic conflict changed everything. To fund the immense war effort, Britain had to spend its wealth on an unprecedented scale. The country drained its vast gold reserves, which had backed the pound's value. It also borrowed enormous sums of money, particularly from the United States, going from being the world's biggest creditor to one of its biggest debtors. By the time the Roaring Twenties arrived, the damage was done. The pound was no longer the unshakable currency it once was. It had lost its stability, and the world's confidence was wavering. The financial foundations of the British Empire were cracking, and as the old giant stumbled, a new one was quietly stirring across the Atlantic, ready to take its place. The era of the pound was coming to a dramatic end, setting the stage for a new financial power to rise and define the century to come. Picture this. It's 1944. World War II is finally winding down, but the global economy is an absolute wreck. Cities are in ruins, industries are shattered, and countries are broke. Well, almost all of them. One nation stood tall, untouched by the devastation on its own soil. The United States. Let's look at the numbers, because they are staggering. America's economy was, by far, the largest in the world. Its factories were pumping out half of all manufactured goods on the planet. And here's the real kicker. The U.S. held a massive 70% of the world's entire gold reserves. While other nations were rebuilding from ruble, America was a powerhouse of production and wealth. So, in the summer of 1944, representatives from 44 allied nations gathered in a small town in New Hampshire called Bretton Woods. The mission to design a brand new global economic system from the ashes of the old one. With its unmatched economic muscle, America stepped up and made an offer that the world simply couldn't refuse. The proposal, known as the Bretton Woods system, was bold and straightforward. Here's how it worked. Every other currency in the world would be pegged to the US dollar at a fixed exchange rate. And what was the dollar pegged to? Gold. The US guaranteed that anyone could exchange $35 for 1 ounce of gold. This effectively made the dollar as good as gold. In exchange for this special status, the United States promised to be the anchor of the global economy. It would stabilize international trade, provide loans for reconstruction, and ensure financial order. Why did everyone agree? Honestly, they didn't have much of a choice. The US had all the gold, so it had all the power. If you wanted to trade, rebuild, and prosper, you had to play by America's rules. This was the moment the dollar became king. It was no longer just America's money. It became the world's money, the central pillar of the entire financial universe. This wasn't just a financial agreement. It was the birth of a new economic empire, an empire built not on territory, but on the power of its currency. This was the first critical step in the dollar's journey to global domination, a system that would shape the world for decades to come. Have you ever wondered why money today isn't backed by gold? Let's travel back to 1971, a year that completely changed the world of finance forever. This is the story of the Nixon Shock. Back in the late 1960s, the United States was spending a ton of money. Think about it. The Vietnam War was raging. The Cold War demanded huge military and technological investments, and massive welfare programs were expanding back home. To pay for all this, America started printing more and more dollars. The problem, the US dollar was supposed to be backed by gold, meaning anyone could exchange their dollars for a fixed amount of gold from the US Treasury. But as more dollars flooded the world, other countries started to get nervous. They realized the US was printing way more money than it had gold to cover. Countries like France began to call America's bluff. They started demanding gold in exchange for the stacks of US dollars they held. It got so serious that France actually sent a warship to New York Harbor just to pick up its gold reserves. Can you imagine that? A military vessel showing up to collect gold. This put immense pressure on the United States. If everyone demanded their gold at once, America's vaults would be empty in no time. Faced with a potential economic catastrophe, President Richard Nixon had to make a drastic move. On August 15th, 1971, he went on television and made a shocking announcement to the world. He declared that the United States would no longer convert dollars to gold. At a fixed value, who's like that? He unilaterally severed the final link between the dollar and gold. This moment is famously known as the Nixon Shock. Overnight, the entire global financial system was turned on its head. The US dollar was no longer backed by gold or any physical resource. It became what we call a fiat currency, backed purely by the trust and confidence people have in the US government and its economic power. Many economists at the time were horrified. They predicted hyperinflation and the complete collapse of the dollar's value. They thought without the discipline of gold, nothing would stop the government from printing money into oblivion. But the dollar didn't collapse. In fact, it grew even stronger. Why? Because America had a secret weapon, a brilliant and powerful backup plan that would ensure the dollar remained the world's dominant currency for decades to come. This plan would tie the dollar not to gold, but to something even more valuable in the modern world. Have you ever wondered why the US dollar is so powerful? Why does every country, even those who dislike America, need it? The answer lies not in gold, but in a secret deal made back in 1974. Let's rewind to 1973. The world was hit by a massive oil crisis. Gas prices skyrocketed, and economies were in chaos. Amid this turmoil, the United States made a quiet, but history-changing, diplomatic move. American officials flew to Saudi Arabia with a groundbreaking proposal for King Fahd. The offer was simple but profound. Sell all of your oil exclusively in US dollars. In return, America will provide military protection for your kingdom indefinitely. Think about that. Oil for dollars. Security for loyalty. Saudi Arabia, the world's largest oil exporter, agreed to the deal. What happened next was a domino effect. Soon, all the other OPEC nations, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, followed Saudi Arabia's lead. This was the birth of the Petrodollar system. Overnight, the game changed. The US dollar was no longer just backed by gold. It was now backed by black gold oil. This single agreement had massive global consequences. First, any country that wanted to buy oil now had to get US dollars first. Imagine you're a country that needs oil to power your cities, run your factories, and fuel your cars. Suddenly, you have a constant, insatiable demand for American currency. Second, this applied to everyone, including America's adversaries. Even nations that were politically opposed to the US found themselves forced to acquire and hold US dollars to participate in the global energy market. This created a built-in demand for the dollar that was independent of American economic performance. Think about the scale of oil. It's the single most traded commodity on the planet. It's the lifeblood of global transportation, from ships to planes to trucks. It's absolutely essential for modern economic growth. By tying the dollar to oil, the U.S. effectively turned its currency into the world's financial oxygen. No country could function without it. The petrodollar system cemented the dollar's status as the world's primary reserve currency, giving the United States incredible economic and geopolitical leverage. It is a fascinating story of how a secret handshake in the desert reshaped the modern world and made the dollar stronger than ever before. Ever wondered how the US dollar became the king of all currencies? It wasn't an accident. Let's rewind to the 80s and 90s, a period that set the stage for the dollar's total world domination. This was the era of globalization, and it was explosive. Global trade didn't just grow, it tripled. And what was the fuel for this fire? You guessed it, the USA. Emerging markets, hungry for growth, borrowed massively in dollars. International institutions like the IMF and the World Bank were handing out dollar-denominated loans left and right. Think about the world's most essential goods: oil, gold, wheat, steel. Suddenly, they were all priced in dollars. American banks went on a global expansion spree, setting up shop in every major financial hub. By the year 2000, the dollar's grip was unbreakable. A staggering 90% of all foreign exchange trades involved the dollar. 80% of global trade was settled in it. Central banks around the world were sitting on trillions of dollars in their reserves. It wasn't just America's currency anymore. It had become the world's default currency. So, what about today? We hear a lot about countries like Russia and China wanting to de-dollarize and escape this system. But can they really do it? Let's break down why it's a nearly impossible mission. First, global trade. China is the manufacturing powerhouse of the world, the biggest exporter on the planet. But here's the catch. When countries buy Chinese goods, they almost always pay in dollars. For China to refuse dollars would be like a shop owner refusing their most popular form of payment. It just doesn't make business sense. Second, the entire global financial system is built on a dollar foundation. When countries or big companies need a loan, they usually get it in dollars. When they make huge international transactions, they're settled in dollars. Trying to switch to another currency would be like trying to change the plumbing of an entire city overnight. It's incredibly complex and disruptive. Then there's the issue of trust. The Chinese yuan is an option, right? Well, not really. It's tightly controlled by China's central bank, which makes international investors very nervous. There's no transparency. As for Russia, with sanctions and political instability, the ruble is just too risky for anyone to rely on. The dollar, despite its flaws, is seen as stable and trustworthy in comparison. And maybe the biggest hurdle is what we call the network effect. The dollar is used because, well, everyone else uses it. It's like social media. You use a certain platform because that's where all your friends are. To get everyone to switch to a new currency simultaneously is a coordination problem of epic proportions. Even China's massive Belt and Road Initiative, a project designed to expand its global influence, still relies heavily on dollar financing for its projects. But the dollar's power isn't just about finance and trade. It's backed by something much more formidable: sheer military and geopolitical might. The United States has over 800 military bases scattered across the globe. The U.S. Navy effectively controls the world's most critical sea lanes, ensuring trade routes remain open and secure for dollar-based commerce. Furthermore, the U.S. wields immense influence over key international institutions like the IMF, the World Bank, and the SWIFT banking system. This gives it the ultimate economic weapon: sanctions. With the flip of a switch, the U.S. can cut a country off from the global dollar system, effectively crippling its economy. This creates a powerful deterrent. Other nations understand the unspoken rule. If you seriously challenge the dollar's dominance, you're not just risking financial trouble, you're risking economic isolation. And in the most extreme cases, facing immense geopolitical pressure. The dollar isn't just a currency. It's a pillar of American power, protected by a global network of financial and military influence. So, while the headlines might talk about the dollar's decline, the reality is far more complex. The system is so deeply entrenched, so interconnected. and so heavily defended that escaping its orbit remains one of the greatest challenges in modern geopolitics. What do you think? Is the dollar's reign eternal? Or will another currency eventually take its place? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown interesting, do you want to forget to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into how our world really works? Have you ever wondered why the US dollar is still king, even with all the talk about rising debt and new currencies? The answer lies in a hidden weapon, something so powerful it props up the entire American economy. US Treasury bonds. Imagine this. The United States needs money. A lot of it. So, it sells IOUs to the rest of the world. These aren't just any IOUs. They're treasury bonds, and countries line up to buy them. We're talking about major players like Japan, China, South Korea, Saudi Arabia, and many European nations. They willingly lend America trillions of dollars. Why would they do this? 3 simple reasons: stability, trust, and safety. When global markets get shaky, everyone runs to US debt as a safe haven. It's like the financial world's emergency fund. This unique situation gives America an incredible privilege. It can essentially print more dollars, and the world economy will absorb them. Think about that. No other country has this power. Not China, not Russia, not the nations in the Eurozone. Their currencies just don't have the same global trust. Of course, the dollar isn't without its challengers. We hear about them all the time. There's China pushing its yuan, the euro trying to gain ground, and the BRICS nations discussing a new shared currency. Some people even point to gold or cryptocurrencies as the future, but each of these alternatives faces massive hurdles. The Chinese yuan is tightly controlled by its government, which makes international investors nervous. The euro has struggled with the economic diversity and political disagreements of its member countries. A potential BRICS currency is still just an idea, with no real infrastructure. And crypto, they are still far too volatile and lack the sheer scale needed to replace the dollar in global trade. The bottom line is, for a currency to rule, it needs deep liquid markets and unwavering global trust. Right now, none of the contenders even come close. Just look at the last 2 decades. We've shown the 2008 financial crisis that started in the US, the massive economic shock from the COVID-19 pandemic, and US national debt soaring into the tens of trillions. We've seen geopolitical tensions rise and fall. And yet, through all of it, what happened? The dollar got stronger. When crisis hits, everyone still wants dollars. Why? Because the world is deeply intertwined with the American system. Global trade is priced in dollars. The world's most important banks operate in dollars. Many countries rely on US military alliances for their security. The US debt market is the largest and most liquid place to park cash safely. And let's not forget American technology and cultural influence, which further cement its central role. The dollar isn't just a piece of paper or a number on a screen. It's the bedrock of the modern global system. It's backed by the full faith and credit of the world's largest economy, its most powerful military, and the most innovative companies. It's a complex web of finance, power, and trust that has been built over decades. So, the next time you hear someone predict the imminent collapse of the dollar, remember its hidden weapon. As long as the world needs a stable, reliable place to store its wealth, and as long as the alternatives are not ready for the world stage, the dollar's reign will continue. It's not just about money. It's about the entire structure of our global civilization. Ever wondered why the US dollar is king? It's a common myth that it conquered the world through sheer force. But the real story? It's much simpler and far more brilliant. The dollar didn't fight its way to the top. It made itself absolutely essential. Think about it. The world runs on a few key things: oil, global trade, finance, a sense of stability, and security. And what's at the heart of all of these? The dollar. As long as countries need to buy oil, as long as businesses trade across borders, and as long as the global financial system needs a stable anchor, the dollar will be there. It became the world's currency, not by winning a war, but by becoming the one thing everyone needs to get business done. It's the ultimate network effect. So, the next time you hear about the dollar's power, remember it's not about might, It's about necessity. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more insights.